Governor Lamont as part of his administration. And she's here tonight to answer some of your questions and also to tell us what has been going on with the department and how they've been dealing with this historic increase in unemployment claims and the situation that we now find ourselves. So with that, Deputy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. And I'm sorry if I get a little informal and refer to you as Kevin, but it's just kind of, it's old hat. So thank you for having me here. So at the Department of Labor, we are, dealing with this pandemic on a variety of levels, right? So first, we're dealing with this unprecedented volume of claims coming in and applications coming in, and also knowing that what we do can often be the difference between someone getting through this okay and someone struggling through this. So, I can tell you that we actually, I think we're on now day, 62 of working straight through, because until we have provided that safety net that we have the privilege of administering to everyone who needs it, we're not resting either. To give you an idea of what it looks like from where we are, typically the department receives about 10 months of the year what we call off-peak, 2,500 to 3,000 applications in the period of a week. During our peak period, we get about 9,000 to maximum 10,000 applications. So now, since the 13th of March, which is where we look at kind of before and after COVID is starting, we've received 518,000 applications, and 487 of those have reached process. That doesn't mean that they're all paid benefits. Not all claims are payable and eligible, and it doesn't mean that they're through the process when they require a manual determination. But of the 518,000 we've received, 487,000 have made it into that pathway. So that's really well over 3 years of claims that we've received in just 2 months. So to give you an idea of what that translates into, we have paid out $511 million in state funding for state benefits. We've also paid out almost $782 million in the federal, what is called the FPUC. It's a plus up. It's the additional $600 that people talk about. We refer to that as FPUC. So $781.8 million of the FPUC, which is attached to both state and federal benefits. And then the PUA, which is Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, they all have very similar acronyms. That one we've paid out $21.2 million thus far. That gets paid to a variety of different constituencies, but we've mostly heard about those who are self-employed or are employed by entities that are not contributory to the trust fund for the state benefits. So like religious organizations, Peace Corps volunteers are some of the examples of that. So in total, since this began, we've paid out $1.3 billion between state and federal funding. The other piece of that, I guess I just want to let you know, is that, sometimes we think of Department of Labor and we think of like processing the unemployment and it's, somewhat mechanical, but our staff are just really, I have to say how proud I am of our staff. We are encountering the same challenges everyone else is with the COVID. I have staff who have been out for numerous reasons because of COVID, and the stress of, working 63 days straight. So I'm really proud of what they've done thus far, keeping in mind that, we are that lifeline for a lot of people right now, and our heart is in it. To give you an idea of the most recent, and I'm going to try to hit as many things as I can so that, some of the questions maybe get answered. For either program, I'm going to start with this. For either program, I highly, highly, highly recommend people do direct deposit into a checking or savings, because a direct deposit is at least 10 days to 3 weeks sooner that they'll receive their payment than if they do a debit card. And they have to actually go in and select direct deposit, and they can do that. But with the bank processing and the postal service, the debit card is an additional 10 days to 3 weeks at times. I also want to say that people need to be really, really, really careful when they're entering in this application and doing their weekly certifications. It is similar to what they used to tell us in school. You know, you don't hand in your test till you double check your answers. Please, please, please double check your answers before you submit your application or your certification. Of the 518,000 applications we've received thus far, I can tell you that one point last week I checked and we had 43,000 people who had entered their social security number with some type of a mistake. So whether it was that they inadvertently hit a wrong number or they transposed two numbers, that just slows down everything for them. And so please check your answers before you submit. The other big one is names, the last name. If it's a hyphenated or if it's two names, make sure it's consistent with the way it's on your legal documents, specifically your social security number. And getting into the PUA, the newest program, which is the self-employed and the federal benefit. We opened up the gateway to that federal application last Thursday. It's a two-step process. For by law, you must be deemed ineligible for state benefit, and that is any amount of state benefit in order to apply for the federal PUA. So that benefit is anywhere from $198 to $649, and added to that for the period of March 29th until July 25th, there's also an additional $600, that FPUC that I mentioned gets added to that. It's retroactive, that program, back to February 2nd. They do need to explain why their unemployment or underemployment was affected dating back to that, or whatever date it was effective to. And that goes until the end of this year. And so it also, they will be asked how their unemployment or underemployment is related to COVID, and they'll need to be able to respond to that. And I actually should say the PUA, I'm sorry, that one is 39 weeks. I apologize if I said that one wrong. I can keep going on, or we can get to questions. There's a few more kind of really common things that happen if you want me to go over those to assist people, or if you want to start taking questions.
If you think they're general in nature and would be important
Okay.
information for folks that might not have questions already in.
Fabulous. Okay, so regardless of which program, whether it's your state unemployment or the PUA, please make sure that you file weekly. You have to go in every week on a Sunday. If you miss that, you could do Monday or Tuesday, but beyond that, it gets complicated. And you have to certify that your employment predicament. And that's absolutely positively necessary for integrity purposes. The programs are designed that way because it's trying to indicate whether or not there's been a change that might affect your eligibility. If you don't and you forget, then what it does is it puts a hold on your claim and your benefits. And then we get into being affected by the backlog that we have and the communication issue. So please don't forget to do that, file weekly. And the 198 minimum is the amount that all PUA eligible applicants will start receiving. And that's actually been a big issue. So I just want to go over that one. As I said, the benefit range is 198 to 649. But for a variety of reasons, we are beginning everyone who is eligible at 198, and then we add the 600 to that. The reason being that right now, when you go into your application, you are self-attesting to what your wages were. But we need and are required by the federal government to do some verification of that if we're going to give you more than that minimum 198. So we started working with DRS just a week ago, and that's been a tremendous partnership. But what we need to do is we need to have you upload documents if you're looking for a redetermination to a higher rate. When you're in your initial application, that had been the expectation that people would be uploading them then. We've since had to add an opportunity to upload outside of the application, and I can go over that after too. But if you have filed your taxes and you have your tax return for 2019, that's what your benefit rate is determined by. You upload that, and we then are verifying with DRS. If we find that you were eligible for more, we will do a redetermination to a higher rate, and you will be paid that retroactively. If you don't have your taxes filed yet because you've taken advantage of the allowable extension, that's okay. You just need to have the documents that you would typically use to do your taxes, and you can upload those, and then we will look at those for a fact finding and see if there's a need for redetermination. If you don't have these documents, or if you don't upload them, you will remain at the 198 and not go for a redetermination. The last thing, Kevin, is that we had previously, we're constantly looking and monitoring and trying to make adjustments for customers without them having to be able to tell us the problem. And we noticed a couple of things. People were having challenges uploading documents. There had been a 1 megabyte size on that upload capacity. And so we've now amended that to a 2 megabyte size that started, I just think 24 hours ago. And we also, like we said, for integrity purposes, when you do any application for unemployment, state or federal, you go in, and once you're done and you submit, you're not allowed to access that. You can't go in and fix it or amend it. And, so many people didn't have their documents ready. So what we did is we had the Reemploy Connecticut vendor, which does this federal system for us. We had them go in and add an opportunity. So when you access your claim after you've applied and it's set up and you access it, there's a tab on there that you can go to, and it says proof of wages, and you can upload numerous documents. I know we've had people uploading 10 plus documents there. And again, each one is a 2 megabyte capacity. So that's an add-on that we just did within the last 24 hours that you could upload outside of and after your application.
Wow. That's a great update. Thank you for that information. We'll turn now to some questions, okay? Our first question is from Jill, who indicated that her boss had been approved for the federal PPP program, but as of today has not received any of the funding. Her and her coworkers would like to know if they would be able to do two things. One is collect unemployment retroactively to the day of our first being shut down. And two, if not, will he be able to pay us retroactively using the PPP funds? I'll go ahead. You can start with the first question.
Go ahead.
What I was going to say is, as far as the PPP program, what I understand the federal program was set up for was an 8-week period, beginning the date that the loan is funded. So he hasn't received it today. It's going to be prospective in nature. So whenever he gets that, it will pay wages and benefits and certain expenses for that 8-week period from the date of funding forward. But going back in time, the answer to that, I believe, is no. So with that, what will labor do with regards to unemployment retroactively?
So it definitely does get a little bit complicated, as you can imagine. So what they should do is they should fill out their unemployment application based on the circumstances that they are experiencing at that moment in time. So, and it's always asking you about questions about the previous week. So if they have not been having any kind of payment because the PPP loan had yet to come in, then that's how they would answer their question, that they hadn't been, they had been unemployed since that date because they have not received anything. And then the tricky part becomes when it does come in, and if they're receiving benefits, then from that point forward, they have to declare, once they start receiving the PPP, they have to declare that as wages. So you are able and allowable to receive partial unemployment when you have partial wages, but there is a formula by which we determine that, and that's why it's a very individualized question. So when you apply for unemployment, we do a look back to 2019 and we look at your wages, and that's how we determine what's going to be your weekly benefit rate. As you can imagine, that rate ranges from $15 to $6.49. So this can be very different for anyone in that spectrum. That is the amount that you'll be getting every week that you're eligible, and you certify that. And then if all of a sudden you start getting this PPP or any other kind of wage, a part-time wage, you will, on your weekly Sunday filing, you will be asked to report if you earned wages during that week, and you need to report that. And these are just wages like anything else. What happens is the formula is pretty roughly that the amount of wages you earn during that period we take 2/3 of that amount, and this is all state law formula. We take 2/3 of the amount of wages that you earned during that period. We subtract that from your weekly benefit rate. So let's just say you have a weekly benefit rate of $300, and then you're making $300 in wages. We take 2/3 of that, so that's $200, and we subtract that from your weekly benefit rate. So that means you still get a benefit that week of $100. Now, during the period of the FPUC until July 25th, you actually get another $600 on top of that. But if in fact the formula comes out that we take 2/3 of your weekly earnings, that your weekly wages that week, and that amount is higher than and greater than your benefit rate, you're not going to get a benefit that week. You're not going to get the benefit or the $600. It does not exclude you as long as you're within your benefit year and your 26 weeks that you're allotted. It doesn't exclude you from then filing the next week, and you may or may not have earned more or less. So it's week to week.
Great. Now, the next question kind of dovetails on that because it's also related to partial unemployment benefits. But I want to make sure in this context that we answer this question because it comes from Paul, who also happens to be an Air Force veteran. And I'd like to first and foremost thank Paul for his service to this country. And when veterans ask questions, I like to go the extra yard and make sure that we answer that specifically. He is, using his post 9/11 GI Bill as a full-time student and is going to graduate this month. Unfortunately, his stipend ends on May 2nd. Okay. And that was his main source of income. He does have a part-time job, 24 hours a week, and used to supplement that as a part-time hockey coach. But given the fact that kids can't play sports right now, he's lost that too. And just with regards to this and partial unemployment and the loss of income, what would he do in that situation to make sure that he would become eligible?
So first, again, thank you, Paul, for your service. As Senator Kelly said, we appreciate you. As far as his scenario, this is incredibly individualized and complicated, and I'm not going to be able to give you any kind of assurances because of the complexity of the individual circumstances. I can tell you a couple general things. One is that, everybody has a right to file an application, and I certainly do recommend that he do that. And people can qualify for partials, as I said, and he may very well do that. But we need to look at all circumstances before we could make a determination, which is why I'm sorry that I can't give you a flat out answer. I will say that one of the conditions of unemployment, and that's whether it's state unemployment or federal, it is, and this is nationally, you must be able and available to work. And that's there's no getting around that, right? Now, that becomes very complicated in times of COVID-19 and a pandemic, because how do we define, that? So able and available to work for the state program is held to a little bit different standard right now than it is for the federal PUA program, because the federal PUA program has given us very specific guidelines by which somebody, if those apply, they don't have to be able and available if for these COVID reasons. We don't have that very well laid out and specific to the regular unemployment. A full-time student, and I'm expecting he is a full-time student based on what he's written here, they have to go through a hearing to determine if they're able and available to work. And in some circumstances they are, and in other circumstances they aren't. And so that's why I'm sorry, Paul, I would like to give you a very concrete answer, but I can't, because there's a lot of things in play here. And so you would be best off filing, but you will have to go through a process of a fact finding.
Thank you. Next is Jordan. And it states that I was wondering if there was any update for anyone who had to file for unemployment and had to comply with a hearing before being granted benefits. They had sent in the paperwork back in April. and have yet to hear any determination of if or when they will receive benefits.
So, so there's different levels of hearings, and it's a little bit hard for me to know which level he's at. But so basically, there's a whole bunch of conditions by which we have to do a fact finding or even go to a hearing, and some of those are things like, you know, if they have a pension, if there's military, there's a whole bunch of scenarios that require manual determination. And then there's a bunch of scenarios that require a hearing. So for instance, if somebody says they quit their job, they may have done so for very legitimate reasons, but we have to have due process for the employer and the employee to determine whether or not they are eligible. There's things that the employer needs to be allowed to be notified about and to amend if possible. There's reasons that the job is beyond what we would expect an employee to have to do. So it's unfortunate, but there do have to be fact findings and hearings. Usually the predetermination hearings are where we're talking about the written paperwork. So I'm thinking that maybe that's what he's speaking to. And he basically would fill out a questionnaire and return this, and our adjudication staff would look at that. That's about a 36-day turnaround at this point in time. So depending on when in April, you know, we may be close to that. If it was the beginning of April, we may not be up to that yet if it was the end of April, but that's what would be expected for that. If then there's a determination in that process and they want to appeal, then it goes to the higher board. And there is about a 10-week wait for that process. So I'm not sure where he is.
Okay, fair enough. Our next question comes from Candace. And she is a dental hygienist who can't work or isn't working. And her application is on hold. She was originally sent an email stating that I wouldn't have to file every week, so they didn't. And initially, she received 2 weeks' pay, and then it stopped. And now she received an email that says her status is H, and there's a 34 in the message that states I returned to work, when in fact she hasn't, because she's a dental hygienist. What should she do in that circumstance?
So she actually is one of those folks who it would be helpful if she were to communicate with you and you could help facilitate that to us. The reason being, there's a couple things at play there. So, okay, so she started receiving benefits and then there was a hold on it. It sounds like she was someone who had been designated to expedite processing with a return to work date that was maybe not amended. So it looks as though she has gone back to work. And in fact, she's stating that she hasn't. That could be one reason. Another reason could be that in the weekly certification, when she's asked to certify the conditions, and so that we can see if her employment status is still the same, there may have been one of those questions that she answered in a way that triggered a hold. So for instance, we very commonly, and I don't know that Candace is doing this, but we very commonly have people answering a question about, you know, have you turned down, I forget how it's exactly phrased, but did you have an offer and turn it down? Did you decline work? And many people right now are answering yes to that because in fact, based on COVID pandemic situation, they have, but what that tells the system is that they've been able and available and they turn down work. And so it doesn't mean that they won't be continued to be considered eligible, but it does mean that in normal pre-COVID times, it warrants us having a conversation with them. It warrants us understanding why they answered the question that way and then resetting them if possible. So there's a lot going on. And then often, although I think she said that she's continued to go to her weekly filing. If somebody misses one of those, again, that's an automatic hold on their account. So I think that, you know, Senator Kelly, if you were willing to have her email you and you could forward that on to us, that we could look at her individual case.
Certainly, and this isn't only for Candace, but for anybody listening, if you have questions or issues, you can always forward that to my office. My email is kevin.kelly, that's Kelly, @cga.ct.gov. or by calling the Capitol office at 860-240-8826. That's 860-240-8826. The next question we have is from Megan. And this is, this is something that I think a lot of, not a lot, but people in this situation, this is a compelling question. She is receiving unemployment due to her job being closed, but it will be reopened come May 20th. And she's choosing not to go back because she is pregnant, and she also has a 5-year-old at home whose school is closed. Does she have to reapply for the PUA, or can she continue to submit her weekly Sunday claim as she presently is?
When you say the PUA, but she's, I think it said in the beginning, is she actual state UI benefit?
I believe, she doesn't differentiate, but it sounds like she's getting, the state unemployment.
Yeah, I think the two might be confused there. So, so
Right.
somebody who's receiving the state unemployment benefit, and this is something that we are having lots and lots and lots of